In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, Contemporary Issues. In this series, we're looking at a variety of commonly asked questions or issues which confront Muslims in these times, in modern times. I welcome you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace and blessings be on each and every one of you. In this segment, we'll be looking at the inheritance laws. And this is part and parcel of the female-related issues which are commonly used to create a negative image about Islam and Muslims. Women, they get 1/3 the portion of the men. Men get 2/3, they get 1/3. 2 for the men, 1 for the women. This is the general impression which is given. Now, before we look at the issue of how wealth is divided, we need to look at the issue of the division of wealth in a general sense. That division of wealth and the process of inheritance represents the giving of rights to people to own property. Now, this is something which was only given to Western women recently, women in most parts of the world. In the Muslim world, this was given 1,400 years ago. It's only the turn of the century, the beginning of the 20th century, that women in the West, in America and England, had the right or gained the right to own property. 1,400 years ago, women had that right with the revelation of the final message of Islam, and they had not only to own it, to do with it as they wished, you know, to utilize it for sale or purchase or whatever in that sense. So we have to look at it first from that point of view, that Islam gave this right to women at a time when people weren't even thinking about it, at a time when people were debating whether women even had souls. How could they be considered, you know, as human beings along with men? These kind of thoughts and these kind of concepts were around. Some societies, when a husband died, the woman was expected, because they burned the bodies, the woman was expected to climb on there with him, sat, and be burnt up in flames, because her life is meaningless. Without her husband, she's only there to serve her husband. Now, the Islamic system, we also have to consider that wealth is divided up into set portions. The system is there, declared by God. So much for this person, so much for that person, so much for the parents, so much for the children, so much for the brothers and sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, you know, these kind of things have been set. Now, in the Western system of inheritance, a man may have children, may have parents, may have brothers and sisters, may leave a wife behind, and yet he or she, if it's the other way around, may leave all of their wealth in a will to their cat, or their dog, or their parakeet, or their pet monkey, whatever. They can leave their will to whatever, their money, all of their wealth, to whatever they wish. This is a whole different kind of view of wealth. There's a different view. In Western society, wealth is the individual's right to do with as he pleases. Islamic You know, wealth is a trust placed in our hands to be used in accordance with God's laws, to be used in a correct manner. So people are not allowed to just squander and give away wealth in nonsensical ways as this. They are prohibited. The portions which are due to children are set. You cannot tamper with it. There is a portion, 1/3, which they can give to people who would not normally inherit. They cannot give this to somebody who's already going to inherit, but to somebody, a distant relative or a non-relative who has been very kind, helpful in their lives. They want to make a will and give to that person, they can do that. But that's the max, 1/3. So, first and foremost, Islam gave women the right to inherit and to own this property 1,400 years ago. Secondly, the division fixes the rights of those who, family members, close family members, the rights to inherit, which cannot be tampered with. And wealth, which is due to them, which is set, the owner of the wealth cannot change. Now, the next point that we need to look at is women and men in society. From the Islamic point of view, the ideal, and most societies function in accordance with this ideal to varying degrees, is that a woman is always looked after by a male. By a male in the society. From the time she's born, she's the responsibility of her father. If the father dies, she becomes the responsibility of her brother, or her father's brother, or her father's father. Somebody is responsible to raise her up, look after her, provide for her. If she gets married, she's the responsibility of her husband. She has children, her sons become responsible to look after her. If she is divorced, she goes back to her parents. She's not on her own. She's not pushed out to just go fend for yourself. She goes back to her parents, or goes back to the relative who is looking after her. It's their responsibility to take care of. So now when we're going to divide up wealth, we have to take this into account. The fact that males have this additional responsibility, especially those close relatives. They have this additional responsibility. So we find that Allah, in the case of sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, they divided up, the wealth is divided, 2 portions for the male, 1 for the female. 1 portion for each of them as the division of the wealth. An additional portion is there for the sons, for the grandfathers, fathers, to help them in their responsibility to look after females in the society. And this is the principle behind it. And it should be mentioned that this is not in all cases, because you can find in the 4th chapter of the Quran, verse 11, where Allah says, if a man or woman died and left neither descendants or ascendants, no children or parents, but left behind a brother or a sister, each get 1/6. And if there are more than 2, they equally share in 1/3. That's the law. In the case of brothers and sisters where there are no inheritors, either from the parents' side or from the children's side, then the brothers and sisters share it equally. 1/3 max, if there are 2 or more. Now, the rest of it goes into the society, goes into the Baitul Mal, right? The other 2/3 was one may say, well, what happens to that? It goes into the Baitul Mal to look after the central treasury, to look after those who may be orphaned or whatever, and don't have family members to look after them. So it's there to help them through the principle of zakah, right? Distribution of zakah. So we can see then in general that the division of wealth between males and females, sons and daughters in specific, and parents, This division of inherited wealth takes into account the role of the male as the provider and maintainer of females in society. Naturally, in a society where this role is rejected, where a male and female is on their own, parents kick out their kids out of the home by the time they reach around 17 or so. Get out, fend for yourself. Whether you're male or female, it's the same. Get a job, we'll get a job, or whatever. You're on your own. Naturally, in such a circumstance, it would seem quite unreasonable to say, okay, males should get twice the portion of the females. Because what's the male doing? Why does he deserve this additional portion? And truly, in such a circumstance, we could say it would not be just. But this is abnormal. This is not the norm for society. This is an abnormal, this is an aberration. This is some distortion in the family. Family structures breaking down to the nuclear family, to the single parent family. You know, people don't even talk about broken families anymore. They talk about single parent families. So we should not use this as a gauge to judge that situation. What we should use as the gauge is what it should be. Males should be responsible for females. Allah has put them in that position historically, and they remain in that position and will remain in that position, a position of authority and responsibility over females. So we can see then in general that the division of wealth between males and females, sons and daughters in specifics, and parents, this division of inherited wealth takes into account the role of the male as the provider and maintainer of females in society. Naturally, in a society where this role is rejected, where a male and a female is on their own, parents kick out their kids out of the home by the time they reach around 17 or so. You get out, fend for yourself. Whether you're male or female, it's the same. Get a job, we'll get a job, or whatever. You're on your own. Naturally, in such a circumstance, it would seem quite unreasonable to say, okay, males should get twice the portion of the females. Because what's the male doing? Why does he deserve this additional portion? And truly, in such a circumstance, we could say it would not be just. But this is abnormal. This is not the norm for society. This is an abnormal, this is an aberration. This is some distortion in the family. Family structures breaking down to the nuclear family, to the single parent family. People don't even talk about broken families anymore. They talk about single parent families. So we should not use this as a gauge to judge that situation. What we should use as the gauge is what it should be. Males should be responsible for females. Allah has put them in that position historically, and they remain in that position and will remain in that position, a position of authority and responsibility over females. The second point we'd like to discuss this segment of our program, again, female-oriented issue, is about the two witnesses. Again, if there are contracts, as mentioned in the second chapter of the Quran, verse 282, get two of your men as witnesses. But if two are not available, then get a man and two women agreeable to you as witnesses, so that if one of them makes a mistake, the other can remind her. This is the verse, clearly indicating that when one needs witnesses, one male is equal to two females. And it's explained why. For one to help the other to remember in case they forget. But we should understand that this is in what context? It's in the context of business contracts, where the males are normally out in the society dealing with the various contractual agreements and conscious of percentages and who owes what and this and all the kind of fine details. They're familiar with that, where the women normally are in the home, looking after the home situation, raising the children, these kind of things. She's not so familiar with it. So the males, you know, they as an individual can stand as a witness because they're familiar with this kind of circumstance, where females, where they have to come into a circumstance where they're not familiar, then the chance of them forgetting, you know, is greater. So by having two, one can remind the other. It's also been pointed out that women tend to be more influenced in their opinions than men, meaning that if a woman, she tends to be more accommodating. You know, she likes to accommodate. They did an experiment on one television program which was shown in America some years back, you know, where they measured the height of a building. They knew the height. And from some distance away, they had somebody meet people and ask them to guess the height and try to convince them that it wasn't that. What they found was that when a woman would come to them and they would say, oh, how tall is this? And they would give an estimate, you know, which was pretty close, not too far. But they would say, no, 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 you know, this, no, 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 wait, I think it's much less and so and so. That the woman eventually would agree to accommodate. This is her nature. She tends to accommodate, you know, and she will agree in the end. Though her original choice is correct, she agrees to avoid argument. This is her kind of nature, in a sense. Whereas the men that were met, right, because the person who's asking them, the person who already knows it's a part of the show, the men, when they make their estimate and the commentator tries to lower it, they'll, no, no way. They're fixed on it. No, no, no way, no way. This is what it is. I don't care what you say. This is what I think it is. The men tend to be non-accommodating. They're fixed in their opinion. They hold firm to it. So, again, perhaps this is an issue which may come into the issue of the witnesses. That a woman, you know, bearing witness, then, you know, she may be influenced by things around her, whereas another woman there to help her back up, you know, in case this influence is taking place. There's another point which should be addressed in this when we're looking at this issue here, is that in a society where women out working and involved in the business world, etc., such a distinction might appear odd. In fact, it appears strange. Why? You know, a woman, she knows about business just like a man. But this is not the norm. Again, we should consider that this is not the norm. This is the product of World War I, World War II, men going to fight, not enough men to run the factories, women taken out of the homes, put into the factories. World War I, many of them went back. World War II, they stayed out. They liked being out there in the workforce. And numbers increased, and of course, affecting employment, etc., because they were taking the jobs that men would normally have, you know. So the issue of responsibility, everybody was on their own then. If women are out there taking jobs like men, then they're on their own. No man is obliged to look after them. It might seem strange to a person coming from that kind of background, but if we look at it from the Islamic background, the way Islam views society, then we can see it's quite reasonable. Furthermore, we should note that this is not under all circumstances. Not every circumstance that comes up we say, okay, we need two witnesses from females for this. For example, in the case of wet nursing, where a woman breastfeeds two children, a male and a female. According to Islamic law, these two become like brother and sister and cannot marry. So if in Islamic law, and the circumstance happened at the time of the Prophet, a woman came to a man and told him, as a child I breastfed you, and I also breastfed your wife. That is enough to end their marriage right there. Her single witness, and this happened in the time of Prophet Muhammad, you know, an individual was told this. His name was Uqba ibn al-Harith. He and his wife, Yahya bint Abi Ihab, they were told, and they went to Prophet Muhammad to complain. What are we going to do with this? You know, the woman was a former slave woman. You know, who was she in the society? You know, she was a freed slave woman, whatever. Can we trust what she's saying? Do we have to go by it? Prophet Muhammad said, "Kaif waqad qil." How can you object when it has already been stated? The woman who is doing the suckling, she's the expert. She knows who she suckled. So if she makes that statement, that is enough to annul the marriage. And of course, these two were obliged to separate to, if they had children, of course, they have children. If in a Muslim society, if people have children, the children are still children, but they cannot remain married together. I mean, just as if, for example, as happens on occasion, people, half brothers and sisters, end up getting married, not knowing that they were half brothers and sisters. If they find out, what do? They have to separate. This is norm. So we don't find it so unusual for circumstance to develop like that, and that's what we do. We shouldn't find it unusual that Islam places this particular restriction. Of course, people would say, well, but Islam allows people to marry their cousins. Why can't you marry this girl who suckled from the same breast as you? Why? Because there is a closeness based on the fact that both children have been nurtured by the same milk. This is what creates a bond which is greater than merely being a cousin. There is a blood bond there, but it is not as strong as the bond of milk. And that is where children are fed before the second year. I mean, it's not just anywhere in your life. You drink some milk and, drink a glass of milk, which is breast milk, and all of a sudden you become somebody's brother or sister. No. But as children, before the second year, which is the year of weaning, where the child's drinking of milk is what builds that child, makes that child. In such cases, drinking the milk, shared milk, makes the children brothers and sisters by suckling. And marriage between them is forbidden. It's considered incest from the Islamic perspective. Now, one might question, who is to say that this is incest? Well, for us, God said. God declared it, and we believe there must be some harm in it, because God, when He forbids something, He forbids it because there's harm in it. There's reason, there's logic. Maybe we're not able to find the harm or to see the harm, but we believe there is harm. So, as Muslims, we avoid marriage to our suckling brothers and sisters. With that, dear viewers, I'd like to thank you for being with us on this segment of our program, Contemporary Issues, in which we have looked at the issue of inheritance in Islam with regards to females and males, as well as the issue of two witnesses, the need for two witnesses in the case of females, equivalent to one single male witness. And I hope this has been enlightening for you, and we hope that you'll continue to follow our program as we continue to look at more and more contemporary issues of current concern amongst Muslims as well as amongst non-Muslims. And I bid you now farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.